Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers.
Right now on Morning News Now, testing Omicron. This morning, new cases of this latest variant reported across the country, while new travel restrictions aimed at curbing its spread start today. The new testing protocols for all international air travelers entering the U.S. as Omicron is identified in at least 17 states. What you need to know if you're returning home from abroad. Plus, new observations this morning on how Omicron affects us, what Dr. Anthony Fauci is now saying about the severity of this new mutation. The morning of, new information this morning surrounding that tragic Michigan high school shooting. The disturbing drawing by the suspected gunman discovered by a teacher just hours before the incident and reported to school officials. Why school officials ultimately decided to send him back to class. And over the weekend, the teen's parents captured by police after an intense hours-long manhunt. Now the owner of the warehouse where police say the couple was hiding out is also a person of interest in the investigation. A hero's tribute. The nation remembers a titan of American politics. Bob Dole, former senator from Kansas, a one-time presidential nominee, and of course, a decorated World War II veteran, passed away at the age of 98. The life and legacy of one of the defining voices of the greatest generation. Plus, stuck at the lodge, this year's ski season off to a bit of a rocky start, as unseasonably mild temperatures from coast to coast are forcing many resorts in the West to delay opening, costing them cash in a crucial recovery year. The troubling new study that could point to a snowless West Coast in just decades as the climate crisis grows. Good to have you with us on this Monday morning.
Absolutely. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Did you?
I did. I had a very good weekend. How about you?
Yeah, good. Sure, some work, travel, all that kind of stuff, but we're used to it.
Sounds good. All right, we got to begin with the pandemic and the major changes for travelers, speaking of travel, but these are the ones who are coming to the United States.
That's right. All international travels are now facing new testing rules as more cases of the Omicron variant pop up around the world. Here in the U.S., more than a dozen states are reporting Omicron cases. Right now, scientists are still trying to figure out how fast the strain is spreading and its severity. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello is following the latest from Dulles International Airport in Virginia.
Hey, Savannah and Joe, good morning, guys. Listen, as you know, these new rules went into effect at midnight. If you are overseas flying back to the United States or you're going to be traveling back and forth, know the rules. You must test negative for COVID within 24 hours of departure from that foreign airport. Up until now, the rule had been 3 days. Now it's 1 day. In the meantime, we have COVID cases popping up all over the United States.
The battle to stay ahead of the Omicron variant is intensifying this morning, with new cases being detected in different states every day.
We are every day hearing about more and more probable cases, so that number is likely to rise.
Overnight, Louisiana joined at least 16 other states in reporting cases of the new mutation. While early data shows Omicron is spreading faster than Delta and may be more likely to cause reinfections, it appears to be less severe so far.
The signals are a bit encouraging regarding the severity. But again, you got to hold judgment until we get more experience.
Meanwhile, beginning today, tougher testing protocols for international air travelers. If you're returning to the U.S. from overseas, you'll now need a negative test within 24 hours of departure just to board your flight. Quick rapid antigen tests and the more expensive PCR tests will be accepted. But not all self-tests are eligible. For those to qualify, a telemedicine rep must witness your test. The new rules already creating challenges.
There's just difficulty having the tests available, being able to process those tests, getting your results back in time. All of that, those just stack up on each other within a 24-hour period.
Bruce Montgomery's family of four has been planning a Christmas trip to Ireland for more than a year. But with various connecting flights, he's concerned about the changing criteria.
I don't want to be trapped in Heathrow Airport for a long period of time and then have to spend thousands of dollars to get home.
Meanwhile, it is still the Delta variant that is driving the winter COVID surge. Over a 7-day period, the average now 106,000 new cases every day. On Friday alone, 1,492 people died.
We have about 90 to 100,000 cases a day right now in the United States, and 99.9% of them are the Delta variant.
That's an astonishing number. 1,500 people dying on Friday alone. Listen, I get a lot of emails and phone calls from Canadians especially. What about us? Yeah, if you're driving across the border from Canada, you do not need to test negative for COVID. Same thing if you're driving across from Mexico. One other note, we had a cruise ship come back to New Orleans, 17 people on board testing positive for COVID. The ship had left New Orleans in late November. It went to Mexico and Belize and Honduras. Now back to New Orleans. Again, 17 people on board that cruise ship testing positive. Joe and Savannah, back to you guys.
Tom Costello, thank you so much.
NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar joins us now. So, Dr. Azar, right now, we don't have to get tested if we're flying within the U.S., but I see that staggering number from Tom there. We lost 1,500 people on Friday alone. COVID's still a huge issue here in America. Do you think testing should be a rule for domestic travel? And if so, how many days before or after travel, should folks get a test?
Well, it's a good question, Joe. I would say the simple answer would be yes, just because I think that that's a little bit of a more comprehensive screen for, importing and exporting cases across state lines. It's just realistically, that's way too cost prohibitive for most families. As we've reported on before, a set of 2 tests can cost close to $50. So I just don't think that that's reasonable. What I would say, if you are planning on traveling and testing and you want to really, really cover your bases now, and this really means that you're going to a destination where you may have a vulnerable family member, which is certainly relevant for the holidays. If you want to be really, really sure that you're negative, you do a PCR about 3 days before you travel. You lay low for those 3 days, try not to expose yourself too much, and then you use the rapids. You can do a rapid, as soon as you arrive, and then a couple of days later, about 3 days later, to really cover your bases, Joe.
Great strategy to hear how people can kind of try to handle it themselves, especially, as you mentioned, if they're worried about seeing certain family members. Now, Doctor, let's talk about vaccines here. So considering that Omicron is just the most recent strain, we've obviously seen many of these different types of mutations. More are expected. Is the best strategy to keep on getting boosters until we get the virus under control, or do you think it will be different with different vaccines down the line? Could there be different vaccines as we have different strains? And what does it mean for somebody right now who's wondering if they should get boosted?
Mm-hmm. So, maybe not surprisingly, there is a very, very robust debate amongst experts right now about the best strategy for boosting. And this all has to do with this concept of something called original antigenic sin, which sounds scary.
Yes.
And it is a little bit. And basically what that means is that your immune system basically relies on the memory of its first encounter of the virus. And that happens with vaccines as well. So the theory goes that if we keep on boosting with the original variant or the original virus, that our immune system is going to be so accustomed to protecting or mounting an immune response against the original that it wouldn't be able to actually mount a good response to a variant vaccine. But I have to say that given all of this, and even though that we have the debate, the consensus among most people is to get a booster now, because we know that Delta is still the predominant strain that is circulating right now. And we know that the booster and we know that our vaccines work against it. So I think I'm still along the line of, if you're eligible for a booster, get it now. Delta is the threat right now. And we do think that a booster now, even given just the breadth and the degree of antibodies that you would generate, would also protect you against Omicron. But this is kind of evolving like daily.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. But Delta is still, as they say, 99.99% of the cases. So, all right. Dr. Natalie Azar, as always, thanks so much.
Thank you. Now, this morning, we're, of course, honoring the extraordinary life of Bob Dole, the longtime senator and 3-time presidential candidate who died Sunday at the age of 98. Here's NBC News' chief Washington correspondent Andrea Mitchell with more on his unparalleled life of service.
Good morning, Savannah and Joe. Bob Dole was a war hero who rose to the heights of power in the U.S. Senate. Though his family did not reveal a cause of death, the senator underwent treatment for lung cancer earlier this year, one of many battles this enduring American figure waged in his remarkable life. One of the greats of the greatest generation.
We have lit liberty's torch with a glow that can truly light the world. That's what America's all about.
Senator Bob Dole, remembered overnight by presidents, dignitaries, and the American people as a man devoted to service. President Biden honoring his former Senate colleague, writing, "May our nation draw upon his legacy of decency, dignity, good humor, and patriotism for all time." In February, in this never-before-seen video, Dole reflected on a life spent on some of the biggest political stages.
You don't just walk out and say, trust me. You've got to earn your trust. And you earn your trust by speaking openly and speaking honestly.
Dole was elected to Congress in 1960, then to the Senate in 1968, where he served as the Republican leader for more than a decade. A tough political combatant who still always believed in working with Democrats for the public good.
We were D's and R's, but we were also friends. Compromise, not a bad word.
He ran for president 3 times, including an uphill challenge to Bill Clinton's second term in 1996.
Tonight I stand before you, tested by adversity, made sensitive by hardship, a fighter by principle, and the most optimistic man in America.
But a life in politics was not what Robert Joseph Dole initially set his sights on. Born in the small town of Russell, Kansas, the star high school athlete wanted to become a surgeon. But World War II took him to Italy with the Army's 10th Mountain Division, where on April 14, 1945, the Germans began firing on his platoon. Flying metal hit Dole's right shoulder and arm, breaking several bones in his neck and spine. He underwent 7 operations over 3 years, losing a kidney and the use of his right arm. Life-changing injuries fueling his advocacy for Americans with disabilities.
The disability community is not large, but it's important.
Father to daughter Robin from his first marriage. In 1975, he married his beloved wife Elizabeth, a devoted partner of 46 years in life, politics, and advocacy.
Do you think she would have made a good president?
Oh, yeah. And then I'd have gotten good food.
Good food?
Yeah, at the White House.
The Doles leading a fundraising campaign to build the World War II Memorial in Washington, honoring all those who served in a war that forever changed his life. His last public appearance, rising from his wheelchair to salute a fellow World War II veteran, friend and one-time political rival, former President George H.W. Bush.
I did it, I guess, and because of my respect for my friend.
George W. Bush writing of Dole, "Now we Bushes salute Bob and give thanks for his life of principled service." And former President Obama writing, "His sharp wit was matched only by his integrity." The nation now mourning and celebrating a man who put country first.
So I leave you all tonight with a full heart and a fervent prayer that we'll meet again.
Senator Bob Dole was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, 2 Purple Hearts, and a Bronze Star. Today would have been Elizabeth and Bob Dole's 46th wedding anniversary. Savannah and Joe.
Andrea Mitchell, wonderful tribute. Thank you.
Turning now to the latest in the investigation into that tragic high school shooting in Michigan. James and Jennifer Crumbley, the parents of the teen suspect, are now in police custody following an intense manhunt. And officials say they could be filing more charges in connection with this case. NBC News correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us now from Michigan with new details. Megan, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. The parents of the suspected shooter have now joined their son here at the Oxford County Jail behind me here. Their bond being set at some $500,000 cash each. Now, the sheriff here says that the Crumbleys are segregated. They each have their own individual cell, and they're being closely monitored. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, we are learning new details on what happened in the hours leading up to this attack.
Troubling new details emerging about the hours leading up to last week's Oxford High School shooting in a letter released by the superintendent. The morning of the attack, a teacher discovering a concerning drawing by the suspect, 15-year-old Ethan Crumbley. The image so disturbing, prosecutors say she took a picture.
Between the drawing of the gun and the bullet is a drawing of a person who appears to have been shot twice and bleeding. Below that figure is a drawing of a laughing emoji.
The school says the incident was immediately reported to counselors, the suspect telling them the drawing was part of a video game he was designing. His parents called into the school for an emergency meeting where they were told to put the teen in counseling within 48 hours. School officials say the parents refused to take their son home, counselors determining he wasn't a threat and sent him back to class. Hours later, the suspect is accused of opening fire, killing 4 classmates.
Is it possible that school officials could face charges?
It's possible, yes.
Over the weekend, the parents of the suspect, James and Jennifer Crumbly, captured after a more than 10-hour manhunt. The Oakland County prosecutor said the couple withdrew $4,000 from an ATM after charges were announced Friday. They're both charged with 4 counts each of involuntary manslaughter. Prosecutors saying they supplied the gun used in the attack.
How are you pleading to count 1?
Not guilty.
How are you pleading to count 4?
Not guilty.
The couple was arrested inside a Detroit art studio early Saturday morning, where police say they were hiding out. Andre Sikora, the owner of the studio and a friend of the couple, now a person of interest, but his lawyer telling NBC News he did nothing wrong.
He definitely didn't know that they were fugitives at that point. The minute he found out, he went to the Detroit Police Department and immediately wanted to give them information.
On Sunday, the Detroit Lions paying tribute to Oxford, wearing a gold O on their helmets during their first win of the season.
Now, this is still a very active and ongoing investigation, and we understand that investigators are going to be looking at the 15-year-old's interaction with other students as well as administrators and teachers. They're certainly going to be honing in to the actions leading up to this horrific tragedy to try and determine if additional charges are warranted. Meanwhile, this morning, we know that a 6th victim has been released from the hospital. Right now, only a 17-year-old student remains. Joe?
All right, Megan Fitzgerald, thank you.
New allegations are emerging in the wake of Chris Cuomo's firing from CNN. This time, there's a sexual harassment claim being leveled against the anchor himself, which he denies.
Last week, Cuomo was suspended for his involvement in helping his brother, the former governor Andrew, battle his own sexual harassment accusations. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson has more.
This morning, CNN anchor Chris Cuomo is out of a job and potentially in even more trouble, accused today of serious sexual misconduct.
This staffer worked with Cuomo at ABC.
The new claim brought to CNN last week, one day after it suspended the primetime host for failing to tell the truth about just how involved he was in crafting his brother Andrew's defense in his sexual harassment scandal. The woman's attorney, Deborah Katz, saying, "My client came forward at this time because she felt in sharing her story and related documentation, she could help protect other women." A Cuomo spokesperson said these apparently anonymous allegations are not true and that Cuomo stands by his on-air statements about sexual harassment issues.
I have always cared very deeply about these issues, and profoundly so.
In firing Chris Cuomo over the weekend, CNN said in a statement, additional information has come to light. It is not clear if this allegation had a role in his firing. Attorney Katz also represents Charlotte Bennett, one of the 11 women whose allegations against former Governor Cuomo led to his resignations, allegations Andrew Cuomo denies. Though CNN promoted the brothers' relationship during the pandemic, Chris Cuomo did not report on his brother's scandal, but in May admitted to being in strategy sessions to help him.
It will not happen again. It was a mistake.
Texts and transcripts made public last week by the New York Attorney General's office showed just how much Chris Cuomo helped. Along with drafting statements and prepping his brother for a news conference, the younger Cuomo also reached out to journalists to see if other accusers were coming forward. Actions that cost Cuomo his job. Tweeting after his dismissal, "This is not how I want my time at CNN to end, but I have already told you why and how I helped my brother."
Now, while Cuomo is out, CNN has yet to name a replacement for that time slot. But an indication of just how seriously the cable network takes this allegation and all the others is that it hired an independent law firm once the New York Attorney General's information came out. And that is who or what is looking into these allegations.
And that investigation continues even
Absolutely.
Despite the resignation.
They said it would continue as appropriate.
Absolutely. All right. Ann Thompson, thank you so much. Good to have you here on set with us.
Time to get a check on your morning news now. Weather.
Now, it's actually warmer than normal here in New York today, but parts of Minnesota received their first significant snowfall. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with the latest on all that. Hey, Michelle, good to see you.
Hey there, guys. So good to see you. Yeah, they finally got snow. They saw anywhere from an inch up to 15 inches of snow. So we had the snow blowers. It definitely looks like winter in Minnesota, and it feels like winter in Minnesota. Take a look at some of these. Oh, there's that video. Look at that, the snow falling right on those leaves. And yeah, you definitely need to bring out all that winter gear. I mean, it's pretty late for that first snowfall in Minnesota. So I don't know if they're happy about it or maybe they wanted it to be a little bit later. But the shovels are out once again, and the hats are out, the gloves are out. And you're going to need those layers this morning because we are cold. It is 12 degrees in Minneapolis. It feels like 10 below zero, but I can't help but notice that terrible temperature in Fargo. It feels like 22 degrees below zero. So layers are necessary there. And as we wake up on Tuesday morning, we're looking at those temperatures continuing just 3 degrees in Green Bay. It's going to feel like 9 below zero. Look at this contrast, though. Savannah mentioned this. It's warm in New York City. It's warm in Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore. 66 degrees today. That's 18 degrees above normal, but don't get used to it because we have some big time changes coming, and that's going to start as early as tomorrow. So just 41 in New York. We're actually going to be below normal. 48 degrees in Richmond. It's going to be cold on Wednesday as well. And then we rebound on Friday, but sandwiched in between there, we have a storm system that's going to bring us rain today in the mid-Atlantic, and then possibly we're going to see some snow on Wednesday. Tuesday looking pretty good, high pressure. But you guys, all eyes on Wednesday. We could see our first snowfall. Right now it's tracking to the south. It's not looking like a big one, but still Bill will be here tomorrow and Wednesday to kind of keep you up to date on that.
All right, we'll keep an eye on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
We also want to take a second to welcome the newest member of our NBC News Now family. Now Tonight with Joshua Johnson premieres tonight. You can catch it weeknights at 8 o'clock Eastern right here on NBC News Now. It's going to be a great newscast. We know the team behind it, including folks who've worked on our show in the past. They've been working hard on it. So welcome to Joshua and the entire team.
Congrats. And now coming up, tensions are rising between Russia and neighboring Ukraine.
Satellite imagery now revealing tens of thousands of Russian troops on their shared border. We're going to bring you President Biden's response next.
Welcome back. President Biden will hold a video call with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday amid growing concerns over a large-scale conflict with Ukraine.
Russian troops have been massing on the border there, but it remains unclear whether Putin is planning to invade. NBC News senior international correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now. Keir, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. Amid those concerns of a deadly conflict in Europe, perhaps within months, that crucial conversation between President Biden and President Putin, according to reports in Russia this morning, will now take place tomorrow, and the time has been set at 10 a.m. Eastern.
Tens of thousands of Russian troops have deployed on its border with Ukraine, revealed in these satellite images. U.S. intelligence warning President Putin's military has drawn up plans to invade.
What we see is heavy weapons. We see armored units. We see drones.
A Kremlin official telling NBC News, "I really hope it will not explode." Ukrainian forces have been fighting Russian-backed separatists since 2014 and are not taking any chances. President Biden will hold a virtual meeting with President Putin on Tuesday. The talks pivotal to preventing a war in Eastern Europe.
We're going to have a long discussion.
While multiple diplomatic sources in Russia and the West tell NBC News President Putin has not decided to invade Ukraine yet. But Russia has been proposing red lines, like no expansion of NATO.
Do you accept Putin's red line on Ukraine? I don't accept anybody's red line.
And President Biden is promising to make any invasion very difficult for President Putin. But one European diplomatic source, guys, told me that Russia enjoys this. It distracts and destabilizes Washington. Joe?
Keir, thank you.
Now, NBC News has learned that the Biden administration is expected to announce a diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics as early as this week. That's according to a senior administration official. Last month, President Biden signaled he was considering the move in a rebuke over China's alleged human rights abuses. A diplomatic boycott would mean no U.S. government officials attend the games. However, American athletes would still be allowed to compete, and a full boycott is not expected. Let's now take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
NBC's Matt Bodner joins us from Moscow. Matt, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. Well, we'll start this hour off in Myanmar, where ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi was sentenced by a court to 4 years in jail. Suu Kyi was found guilty on charges of inciting dissent and violating COVID-19 measures. She actually also faces additional charges, altogether 11 in total. This could see her jailed for life. She has, of course, already been in detention since a military coup back in February toppled her elected civilian government. We move along now to France, where far-right presidential candidate Eric Zemmour was put in a headlock by a protester during his first campaign rally. Zemmour is infamous for hardline anti-immigrant views and the controversial language he uses to talk about those views. He announced his candidacy last week. Protesters gathered outside this rally with signs saying things like "No to racism." And we wrap up this hour in Spain, where hundreds made their way this weekend to Las Canteras, a beach on Gran Canaria, of course, one of the Canary Islands, to see a nativity scene sculpted from sand by artists from around the world. This has actually been going on since 2006, and it attracts thousands of visitors every year. Back to you guys.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. From sand.
No kidding. Take that, sandcastle.
Yeah, seriously.
All right. Thank you,
Very
Matt.
cool. Thanks, Matt.
Coming up on Morning News Now, it's the polar opposite of being snowed in. Ski resorts across the West delaying their grand openings this season because of some unseasonably warm temperatures. How climate change could affect the future of this big winter business.
Plus, another headline-grabbing shortage to add to your list, and this time it's hitting a New York City staple. There's a hint right there. We'll tell you all about the Big Apple's cream cheese shortage up next. Welcome back. I'm not so sure this is such a good talker. Now, a fresh bagel with cream cheese is, of course, a New York City staple, but supply chain problems are threatening this quintessential delicacy. Bagel stores across the city are feeling the crunch and scrambling, get this, to hoard as much cream cheese as possible. New York bagel sellers go through thousands of pounds of cream cheese every few weeks. And because the cream cheese bagel stores use is in its rawest form, shop owners can't just run to the grocery store to pick up more. Frank Matera, the owner of Bagel Smith in Brooklyn, told the New York Times he will be driving to New Jersey to pick up 2,000 pounds of cream cheese himself. 2,000 pounds of cream cheese.
Trying to picture that.
I was just going to say, what does that even look like? Also, this is just like so dangerous. I mean, I haven't eaten yet. It's breakfast time.
You have a bagel store downstairs.
Well,
so,
I know, it's true.
Hopefully they have cream cheese. All right. Thank you. Yeah. All right, this morning a battle is shaping up over whether Congress should pass a law to protect abortion rights after last week's contentious Supreme Court hearing on Mississippi's abortion law. Well, that storm grows. Health officials at the highest levels of government are defending travel restrictions as the new Omicron variant spreads. Meet the Press moderator Chuck Todd took an in-depth look at both topics Sunday. Here are some of those highlights.
On this week's Meet the Press, the Supreme Court heard the biggest abortion case in decades. What happens to American politics if Roe v. Wade is overturned? I had exclusive interviews with Senator Amy Klobuchar and Senator Mike Braun. Plus, Omicron is here. So what do we know? The head of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins, joined me to give us the latest on that. Here's some of the most important answers we received from Meet the Press compressed. What do you make of Justice Kavanaugh's argument that the court should be neutral on abortion and essentially saying it should be up to the politicians?
I would turn this the other way. 50 years of precedent, as Elena Kagan pointed out, 50 years of decisions and court decisions, part of the very fabric of women's existence in this country. This is how our country protected rights. And now they're willing to just flip it on its head. And so what is the answer? The answer may well be doing it through the political process now. I don't think that's the right thing to do, but it may be the way to do it. And I think the best way to do it is not a patchwork of state laws, but to codify Roe v. Wade, put it into law. And we even have some pro-choice Republicans that have signaled interest in doing that.
In your view, when should abortion be legal?
So in my case, when you believe in the sanctity of life, you want abortions to be eliminated from the landscape if you can. You're also in the context of reasonability. And the fact is, regardless of what any one individual, maybe with the point of view of mine or of Amy's, you're not going to settle it in a homogenized way. And that needs to reflect itself throughout states, and whatever one's opinion is, whatever you're trying to do politically, why try to do it at the national level? We generally don't do things well here anyway, and on something as contentious as this, it seems like it would make common sense, it'd be practical and not political to send it back to the states and let every state do what they want to do and live with it. And if you don't like it, then go to work within those legislatures. It was never enumerated in the Constitution that this would be something that would be done at the federal level.
If someone flies to Washington, D.C. over the holiday, it's a popular tourist destination, from Singapore, where 96% of the eligible population is vaccinated, that person has to show proof of vaccination and a negative test. But someone flying to D.C. from Idaho, where less than half of the population is fully vaccinated, doesn't have to do either. How is that at all logical about protecting our community?
Well, you know, I think, Chuck, we're trying to be practical here. If you tried to impose those kinds of restrictions on domestic air travel, that would be extremely onerous for people who are trying to get around the country for things like holidays. And I don't know how much we'd gain by it. If we're worried about whether you're trying to protect some community from Delta, well, Delta's all over the place right now. There's not some chance that you're going to see it spread by air travel that's not happening already in communities. So I think we've got it about right. I do think we have an investment in making sure people aren't bringing new cases, especially when we have things like Omicron to worry about. Hence the importance of requiring international travelers to be vaccinated and to show they've had a negative test. I think that's the right balance.
Our thanks to Chuck Todd for that. A growing number of ski resorts in this country now delaying their openings because warm, dry temperatures are keeping the slopes nearly snowless.
That's right. NBC News Now correspondent Aaron McLaughlin is in Lake Tahoe this morning with more on the trend that has skiers praying for a cold snap. Aaron, good morning.
Good morning, guys. This is really shocking. I'm at 7,000 feet right now. Normally, I'd be standing in 3 feet of snow. The area behind me would be a winter wonderland, but all you see is dry grass and dirt. The temperature's simply too warm for snow, and this ski season's getting off to a rocky start.
This morning on slopes across the West, it's a winter no-show. With little snow on the ground, ski resorts that usually open in time for the Thanksgiving holiday are still closed. Over the weekend, just over a third of the area's ski grounds were partially open. Around Lake Tahoe, where there are over a dozen resorts, just 3 have been able to operate their lifts. The patchy start to the season comes after October's early winter wallop. Snowstorms then left ski season hopes high and now dry.
It's been really warm since then, so, we haven't seen any natural snow.
It's the same story in Colorado. Denver has now gone 228 consecutive days without any measurable snowfall. That's the longest snowless stretch since 1887. California ski regions are the site of a so-called weather inversion. The phenomenon causes warmer air, which typically sits at lower elevations, to rise, making temperatures in the mountains warmer. It's kept Lake Tahoe's nighttime temps above freezing, meaning even man-made snow won't stick.
I can't remember in the 16 years I've been forecasting here when we've had no snow on the ground and no snow on the trails either from man-made snow.
While the dry weather is slumping the early ski season, it's also raising red flags about a worsening climate crisis. Like in the mountains of Hawaii, bracing for a blizzard. Pictures from NASA satellites also show a rapidly melting Sierra Nevada snowpack, a troubling sign for a region whose drying reservoirs are annually replenished by a slower snowmelt. A new study projects in 35 to 60 years, mountainous states throughout the West could go nearly snowless for years at a time.
I think the tourist industry and the recreation industry should absolutely be concerned. These effects are with us already, and we need to learn how to deal with them.
And guys, there is some good news. Temperatures are expected to drop later in the week. Snow is in the forecast, but of course, it's the key question being, is it enough to get those skis out? Guys.
Oh, it looks like you're going to need a lot to be able to ski with that shot behind you. Aaron, thank you so much. And coming up on this hour of Morning News Now, the race to go carbon neutral. Giant corporations turning to something called forest credits to lower their global footprint. It looks good on paper, but the system has some environmental groups sounding the alarm.
Plus, remembering the attacks on Pearl Harbor 80 years after the date, which has lived in infamy. Those stories and more up next. Finding solutions to global warming is now a top concern across the political and corporate landscape. Major companies are trying to get ahead of activists with their own pledges to go carbon neutral in the coming years. Their plans include restoring rainforests in order to receive credits for their climate initiatives. But is that really doing enough to help curb their carbon footprints? NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now with more on this. Josh, good morning to you. So first of all, walk us through what are these credits that some of these companies are getting?
So the basic idea here, Joe, is that trees and rainforests are what's known as carbon sinks, meaning those trees that you see, they actually absorb and store carbon dioxide that would otherwise be going out into the atmosphere, causing global warming. And so by expanding or at least preserving the forests and the trees that we have, we can prevent some of that carbon dioxide from going into the atmosphere. So what companies have been doing is buying credits where basically a middleman says, okay, look, for every ton of carbon dioxide that's going to be safely stored in a tree somewhere, not contributing to global warming, you're going to get a credit. And then you can use that credit to offset your own emissions that you're not able to reduce. So, for example, Delta Airlines, which obviously has a lot of emissions from the jet fuel that all of its planes burn, it is spending $30 million to preserve a Cambodian wildlife sanctuary as well as an Indonesian peat forest, and as a result, they are getting credits that they can then use in their balance books to say, look, we are carbon neutral because all the emissions we have, we're offsetting them with these trees that are actually going to store other carbon and create a net zero kind of situation.
So, Josh, here's the key question. Are these forest credits really making a difference in helping to offset the carbon footprint of these massive companies, or is it just a way for corporations to escape the tough task of actually cutting down on emissions?
Yeah, you really put your finger on the big issue here. Climate finance experts and environmental groups say this whole thing does not deliver near the benefits that it should because, for example, it's really hard to prove what would happen if you didn't pay people to preserve these forests. How do you know that a wildlife area or a forest that isn't cut down was going to be cut down if you hadn't paid this money? And if you can't prove that, you're not really reducing carbon from the atmosphere. You're really just generating something that these companies can use in their advertisements to investors who are climate focused to say they look really good and they're offsetting their emissions, when in fact, when it comes to the climate's balance books, things are still getting worse. And that's the big concern that folks have, particularly as this industry is growing rapidly following the climate summit in Glasgow and efforts by businesses to show they're really taking climate change seriously.
Important issue. Josh Letterman. Josh, thank you.
Now, tomorrow will be 80 years since the attack on Pearl Harbor, the moment that pushed a reluctant United States into World War II. But the generation with firsthand knowledge of December 7, 1941 is dwindling. In fact, less than 2% of Americans who served in the Second World War are still with us. NBC News correspondent Harry Smith shares a history lesson we must never forget.
This is actual Japanese military footage. 6 aircraft carriers with 400 planes sailing 200 miles north of Hawaii, undetected.
Now the British air attack in the end of the war will be carried out.
Their plan to decimate America's Pacific Fleet. Before this day, war planners and strategists acknowledged an attack like this was possible. But
they'll never do it.
Yes. To say it could happen, almost anything can happen in war. It's the most unpredictable of all human activities.
Dr. Rob Citino is a senior historian at the World War II Museum in New Orleans.
This kind of attack had never been launched before, by which I mean this kind of attack, an attack by carrier-based aircraft.
And Pearl Harbor was a target-rich environment.
The Arizona, the Nevada, the West Virginia, the Oklahoma, and the California. 5 of our 8 battleships. To lose one is a national catastrophe. What happened at Pearl Harbor is somewhere in the mega disaster category.
While U.S. forces had drilled for an attack, what happened that Sunday morning didn't seem real.
There were aircraft coming from every direction, and we really didn't know where they'd come from.
We are on Ford Island in Pearl Harbor with U.S. Navy historian Jim Newman.
When you talk to some of these veterans, when they saw those aircraft coming and they saw they were actually dropping bombs, they said, wow, somebody in the Army is going to get in big trouble. They're actually using live munitions.
Over loudspeakers throughout the island, the phrase was repeated, "This is not a drill."
As if you had to convince someone it was happening, because it is such a shock, such a bolt out of the blue.
Through the chaos, though, there were certain acts of courage undaunted. John Finn jumped out of a bed and manned a machine gun. Despite multiple wounds, including a busted leg and incapacitated arm, he kept firing and firing and won the Medal of Honor. Kenneth Taylor and George Welch had enjoyed a night of revelry. Stunned awake by explosions, they sped to their fighter planes and joined a fight in which they were hopelessly outnumbered. They'd knock out 6 Japanese warplanes. Doris Miller worked in the mess hall and laundry of the West Virginia. Blacks then were not allowed combat roles, but when the attack came, and with no training, Miller fired a .50 caliber gun at incoming Japanese planes until being ordered to abandon ship. He was awarded the Navy Cross. After just 90 minutes, the U.S. Navy's proudest warships sat smoldering and sinking. Hundreds of aircraft shredded.
That is the USS Arizona Memorial. You can see turret 3 sticking up out of the water. There's still a lot of the ship that's visible, but just think about what that represents. So 2,400 sailors, soldiers, Marines, civilians, airmen are killed in the attack. 1,177 of them are the USS Arizona alone. So you're talking about 49% of the casualties were killed in action, were killed on that ship.
More than 1 million people visit the Arizona Memorial every year. We visited too, in reverent silence. Time passes so quickly, it seems. History often feels so distant. Not here. The Mitchell Washington family was there as well. Why?
Because to be able to serve is an honor, and it is not something that we should ever not recognize. To be able to serve our country is one of the highest honors.
What happened 80 years ago pushed the heretofore reluctant United States into war.
What Pearl Harbor does is take the big neutral country, the United States, and drags it into the war. You know, a couple days later, the Germans and Italians declare war on the United States. You could not have had a world at war with the United States absent from the fight, and the United States would not have come into the fight, I'm convinced, in any dramatic way without the shock of Pearl Harbor.
A date which will live in infamy.
All right, Harry, thank you so much for your reporting.
More to come this hour on Morning News Now, including a big tech royal crossover for fitness fans. It's time to walk with Prince William.
And the long-awaited return of a holiday mainstay here in New York City, the Nutcracker, is back. We'll take you behind the scenes at Lincoln Center. That's up next.
Following breaking news, New York City will soon require a vaccine for all private sector workers.
Yeah, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio made the announcement just moments ago on MSNBC's Morning Joe. New York City is the first city in the country to move forward with this type of mandate. All private sector workers would have to get the vaccine by December 27th. In addition to this, the city will require proof of vaccination for kids 5 to 11 for restaurants, gyms, and entertainment venues.
Prince William is making a guest appearance on Apple's fitness podcast in an episode scheduled to be released today.
Yeah, the future British monarch is using the platform to encourage people to go outside and get walking while also raising awareness of mental health issues. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter has the story from London.
Hey, Savannah Joe, good morning from a very rainy Kensington Palace. Look, Prince William has been an advocate for mental health for years. Now, in this new episode, he's taking us on a walk, quite literally. It is recorded while he is walking, where he talks about some deeply personal stories, but also some solutions and ways to cope. Take a listen.
We know mental health has been a taboo and a stigma for a long time all around the world, and it still is.
This morning, Prince William is taking time to walk and inviting all of us along for the stroll, too.
We all want to stay fit. We all want to go for walks. We want to go to the gym. We like to keep active. The doctors tell us it's good for us. Well, no one says how good it is to keep mentally fit. It's so important.
His Royal Highness is a guest on the Apple Fitness podcast, Time to Walk, speaking candidly about a dark moment several years ago while working as a pilot for the air ambulance service. There was a rescue operation of a young boy close to his son George's age.
I felt like the whole world was dying. It's an extraordinary feeling. You just feel everyone's in pain.
But in the lighter moments of today's podcast, he shares some of the songs his mother, Princess Diana, used to play to help with anxiety when they were younger.
And one of the songs I massively remember and has stuck with me all this time, and I still, to this day, still quite enjoy secretly, is Tina Turner's To the Best. Because sitting in the back seat, singing away, it felt like a real family moment. My mother, she'd be driving along, singing at the top of her voice. And we'd even get the policeman in the car, he'd be occasionally singing along as well.
For years, mental health has been at the center of public work for the younger royals.
Why heads together and why mental health? It was your idea. It was your idea.
It's a common thread, wasn't it?
And even though the brothers are now working separately across an ocean,
crazy, lost it, can't keep it together.
Harry is also focused on mental health, hosting a town hall on Apple TV Plus with Oprah.
There's more work to do, but something has really started to change.
And no doubt listening to this country's future king speak intimately and frankly about his own struggles is helping to do just that. Now, both brothers have found a home at Apple, talking specifically about mental health. Now, the company says they are donating to 3 charities of Prince William's choosing. They're donating to Crisis Text Line in the U.S., Shout here in the U.K., and Lifeline in Australia, putting their money where their mouth is. Savannah, Joe.
Molly, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Like so many things, the Nutcracker Ballet was canceled last year because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, that's right. But the Holiday Classic is now back in action at New York City's Lincoln Center. NBC News senior national correspondent Kate Snow has the details.
Savannah and Joe, the New York City Ballet's production of the Nutcracker is back on stage after taking a year off for the pandemic, with just a few changes now, delivering immeasurable joy once again. At New York's Lincoln Center, everything is in place. The audience showing vaccine cards, wearing masks, and backstage, all the last-minute preps and adjustments, the makeup, the shoes, the costumes. The Nutcracker is back. Jonathan Stafford is the company's artistic director. The New York City Ballet has been performing the Nutcracker for how long now?
Since 1954, every single year.
Except last year.
Except last year. First time in our history that we did not put on a live production of the Nutcracker, which makes this year even more special.
Dancers and crew get COVID tests weekly, and everyone wears masks during rehearsals. They did have to make some hard decisions. When they planned the show months ago, children under 12 could not be vaccinated. Party, party, party. So they cast kids 12 and older for roles that normally are played by younger dancers. When you guys come on stage, do you feel wow?
Oh, definitely. Being on this stage is just the most amazing feeling.
When the curtains open and you see the whole audience and the whole theater, it feels really beautiful.
7th graders Athena Shavorkin and Reed We Met are Marie and the Prince.
I didn't expect it because in a normal year, I would have been a little too tall for that role.
They've both been in the show twice before and were crushed when last year was canceled.
The pandemic last year, I think for everyone in the world, it was just so difficult. And to be back now is amazing.
I think all of the students right now are just enjoying and trying to say, hold on to every moment. I think we're a lot more grateful for having the Nutcracker.
With bigger kids, they use the opportunity to remake costumes in their original colors. What inspires you about what you do here every night?
We bring this beautiful art form to so many people night after night. And what I think more than ever people need is they need that escape.
Having no Nutcracker is like missing a part of your Christmas.
For so many people, it's a tradition to come and watch the Nutcracker at Lincoln Center, and it's so nice to be part of that experience.
A holiday comeback, reminding us all how special the tradition is. It was so amazing to see that in person. It takes nearly 300 people, guys, to put on that show. All really, really happy to be there and be back at it. Savannah, Joe.
Wow. So many holiday comebacks happening right now.
I love it.
Good to see them. We're reminded of all the traditions that we have.
Absolutely.
Right.
Kate, thanks for that. I know, I'm jealous. I want to get to go to that.
There you go. Well, it's just on the road.
Exactly.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.